Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm a college counselor and have read applications for a small liberal arts college and 2 research universities. My twins are recent college graduates.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. This week in the news, I'm calling this the Susan episode because we get 2 different Susans on one episode. We start out with our own Susan Tree, and Susan will join me to answer a question from a listener from a Northeast listener who wants to know how being low income impacts how her student will be read at different colleges that claim to be need blind. And then we have the final part on the 3-parter on deferrals. This time I'm flying solo, and I look at 7 or 8 different school policies when it comes to what to do when you're deferred. And I show you how they're all over the place. And I divide all of the policies into 3 broad categories. I think you'll find it interesting as you see how details matter. And then we're back with another Susan. This time it is Susan Brisson, who's the Director of Admission at Olin College of Engineering, Needham, Massachusetts. And we'll be breaking down Olin College of Engineering. It's a spotlight. It's a 3-parter, and you'll hear part 1 of 3. And friends, before we dive into my conversation with Susan, I want you to know the sign-up form is up. Coming to South Florida to meet our listeners. I'll actually be there 10 days. I'm doing a fly-in for Lynn College in Boca Raton, Florida. That's 3 days. And then I'm just meeting a lot of families in the South Florida area, current families and ones I've worked with in the past. And we're doing this event on February 19th at 6 p.m. at American Heritage School, Broward in Plantation, Florida. The sign-up sheet is up. Just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com under the events tab. Sign up. We'll do a meet and greet. Hope to see you there. All right, let's transition to our question for a listener with our own Susan Tree. And by the way, friends, this question from a listener is question number 605 on SpeakPipe for episode 605. How cool is that?
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Hi, Susan.
Hey, Mark. Good to be back on the airwaves with you.
Yeah, it's been a while since it's been just us. I like it when we team up with others, but it's also kind of nice to just do something just with you as well. Variety
it sure is.
Makes it interesting. Well, we have a great question from someone who describes herself as a fan from the Northeast.
That's right.
Yeah, but let's play it. It's a good one.
Hey, Mark and your college-bound kid. This is a fan from the Northeast. I'm incredibly grateful for all you do. I have a question about need-blind admissions and whether or not low-income students should be upfront about their status in their applications, openly discussing it. I can't quite figure out how to reconcile the idea that colleges want to be need-blind to remove from the decision-making process the question of who can and can't pay, but at the same time you hear a lot about economic diversity. So if they're going for economic diversity, presumably there might be some advantage to disclosing that you're low income. I just don't know what to do, whether we should not talk about it and maybe they think you can pay and let you in, or should the student maybe talk about it in hopes that that conveys some kind of advantage. Anyway, thanks again for all you do. I'll keep listening.
So where do you want to go with this, Susan? There's a lot of places we could take this question.
Well, and it's really interesting, this particular perspective, because, we all carry, as college counselors, a pretty heavy burden for families whose kids want to attend expensive colleges, which could include the Penn States of the world, which even for our own in-state students here in Pennsylvania has become out of range financially for a whole lot of people. Or, of course, the well-known private liberal arts colleges and universities that have become so expensive. So we're so used to being sensitive to families who feel so disadvantaged by their socioeconomic background. So this is a unique perspective, and one that I'm glad we have a chance to think about. The question of socioeconomic diversity is an important one, and for a bunch of reasons. One is that colleges care about the percentage of Pell Grant eligible students that they enroll, because this is a publicly reported figure. And it's become a point of pride because it reflects hard work on the part of the college to create access for extremely low income kids and parents to see a way to their institution. When I was at Bates in northern New England, we were one of those expensive private liberal arts colleges with a national reputation, but we were also in northern New England in a fairly non-urban area. So you would have thought that schools like that have no trouble recruiting high talent, low income kids, but it was always a problem. So, when you think of schools like that, these are schools that still have to be very sensitive to the fact that their public image may not feel very inclusive to families of lower means. And, just an interesting way to look at it. And percentages of Pell Grant recipients at these schools, as well as public universities, have gone up and up and up because colleges are finally paying attention. Colleges really say, how are you making use of what you have access to? And they're not expecting parents to spend what they've been able to save for colleges on some pay for play experience while their kids are in high school, just so that they look more competitive with the affluent kids. A bit of a tangent, but that's a little bit of the perspective I have on this. It is interesting, though, that colleges, in an effort to make sure that families of more modest financial means and high talent kids are looking at them, is pressure was brought on the Common Application the year before last to experiment with some additional questions on the activities page. And Mark, you may have seen this.
Oh yeah, it's I like it. It's a new addition, and I welcome it.
It was an experiment the year before. There were, I think about a dozen or 20 colleges that were asked to be part of a test pilot. And the university that I was reading applications for at the time was part of that test group. And it's called Responsibilities and Circumstances. And students are invited to, through a checkbox and a text box, multiple checkboxes, I should say, talk about ways in which they have to spend their discretionary time in support of their families for a whole variety of reasons that could be seen as minimizing clubs, sports, research opportunities, all those things that some students are able to devote themselves to when there are not financial limitations. I'm looking at the questionnaire here: assisting family or household members with doctor's appointments, visa interviews, farm work or unpaid work for a family business, interpreting or translating for family or household members, managing family or household finances, budget, paying bills, providing transportation for family or household members, taking care of sick, disabled, or elderly members of my family or household, taking care of younger family members or household members, taking care of my own child or children. We forget about that population. Working at a paid job to contribute to my expenses and my household's income. that there's another section to this that has check boxes: commuting 60 minutes or more to and from school, experiencing homelessness or another unstable living situation, living without consistent heat, power, water. So more of an extreme a set of circumstances. And I would say these last 6 boxes are probably, you're going to see those attached to very low income and probably Pell eligibility, living independently or living on my own. But the ones I read first very often may show up in families across the socioeconomic spectrum. So the question from this mom is, how do we talk about it? I think the first question is, how has your child's experience been defined or limited by circumstances rooted in a lower income situation? I'm probably overcomplicating my language there, but it's not kind of where the dollar figure. I mean, once you're above Pell, right? Once you're in lower middle to middle income bracket, and Pell, as I said, is extremely low. It's, what is it, 150% of poverty level?
Well, they've made changes with the new FAFSA, and a higher percentage of people get Pell now. So it's like 40% of the population. So I wouldn't define it as extreme low anymore.
Okay.
It's 40%. And that's one of the things that some statistics can be a little deceiving. If schools say we were, let's just say 17% Pell and now we're 24. Well, things have changed. It's easier to qualify for Pell now. Susan, I don't remember when we were working together with schools kind of bragging on their Pell Grant numbers. That wasn't happening in the early 2000s. Was that maybe, would you say 10 years maybe? I don't think it's more than 15 for sure.
No, I haven't heard it until the last, 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that's what, and you'll also see it for first gen was always around, but you feel it's reported more now. No, we have this number of first gen, this number of Pell. It was interesting.
Right. It's become a bragging point in a way.
It has.
I'm happy about that, but it's also, not the measure that most families, might be looking at. And I'll be interested to see, this is the first year of the new Pell guidelines, right? So we'll see.
Well, this last year. So it went into effect when we had the new FAFSA. So you remember all the complications that went out with the new FAFSA?
So the kids that are first year college students now.
Yes.
Or second year. No, first year.
Yeah.
First year. I think the question, though, about how to talk about it, the application for admission is not the place for a child to talk about in an isolated way. Mm-hmm. They certainly can talk about their experience. And this is what I always say to families is, you use your vocabulary to describe your experience, right? That's what matters. So for the teenager to talk about, the pride they take in their job or caring for their grandparent or their younger sibling, to talk about the context of the expectations placed on them to help their family function, I think is very, very appropriate, but it should be an authentic part of their personal narrative, right? Otherwise it could look as like a woe is me, or somebody told me to do this.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. To some extent, sometimes the questions, if a school does have custom prompts, might potentially lead you to an opportunity, but it also may not, and it might feel forced. That's one of the things I like about this new checkboxes is there are cues in there for a school to be able to get a sense of the, and they have other cues too. A lot of times I know they've lost landscape, which is a great tool, but a lot of times schools know, depending on, especially if it's somebody from a school district that is overwhelmingly Pell and first gen. But we never actually went into why Common App has added this. And part of it is so that you can read in context more. And I'm really appreciative of it because I mean, you know this about me, Susan. I've worked with such a range of kids socioeconomically, and I feel like I've worked with the middle, the real high.
Yep.
And then my years at KIPP was mostly, my KIPP school was 67% Pell, and that was one of the highest in the nation of all the KIPP schools.
Wow.
Of course, that was back when Pell was 33%. Pell went from being one out of every 3 kids in high school to now it's in the 40s. But I always would feel like when I was working with those kids, they never had the extracurriculars that the well-resourced kids have, because it takes money to hone these extracurriculars, whether it's playing lacrosse or travel baseball, or it's doing summer camps or honing your, violin skills or whatever it is. These things are really, really expensive. And I was appreciative for a certain subset of schools that valued the kids and could read them in context and didn't expect them to have that level of extracurricular. Questbridge has been very helpful, but it's only 52 schools. Jess Lord told me this. Jess Lord's over Haverford's office. Susan and I have known him forever. He said Questbridge has made us so much better at reading files.
Oh, wow.
As an office, because it has really sensitized us and trained us to what does under-resourced really look like compared to someone who might still have significant resources. So schools being able to read in context is a big part of it. Sometimes it's what Susan said. Now that it's a bragging point, and we always say what gets inspected gets expected. So if this is something that board members want to know, are your Pell numbers going up, or the provost or faculty or anyone who's looking at you? If it becomes an institutional priority, then that's going to trickle down to what the admission office wants to do. So some of it is a matter of looking good, and some of it is a matter of truly valuing different perspectives and truly believing that we're going to give the best education
right
to people if they, meet a wide range of people. Some of that is socioeconomic, some of it is geography, some of it's religion, culture, all kinds of different components of diversity. But it's a great question from listener from the Northeast, because we can't be naive and make it sound like it's always a positive, because schools have a lot of pressure on to get a certain amount of net tuition revenue. And they're looking for people that can pay, or they're averaging your numbers up, and the bar can be higher the more money that a school has to give to a particular kid. It's only the wealthiest schools in the country that don't tend to think that way. But
they also know, Mark, never to make assumptions when they're reading an application. Readers never say to themselves, oh, I bet this student is, rich, poor, fill in the blank. Those of us who've read applications, we all know how easy it is to be wrong about that. That the immigrant kid whose parents came from another country, established a restaurant, that could be a low-income family. It could be an extremely prosperous family.
Sure.
You don't make assumptions about that. You read in context with the information that you have. So if a student wants something about their personal narrative to come across, they've got to be clear. And I think that was one of the reasons why this Common App responsibilities and circumstances section was added, is kids don't naturally do a very good job of that. First of all, they may not even know a whole lot about how they compare to others. They may feel certain twinges of disadvantage, if they want to do a $6,000 summer program, and their parents say, well, you better get, a scholarship if you're going to do that, because we're not robbing your college fund to do that. But, you just learn never to make assumptions.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with that. What I was trying to get toward is what I kind of sense Mom from the Northeast is wrestling with, which is this whole thing is confusing to me. Is it an advantage that we're low income and therefore something I shouldn't be sort of ashamed? Because she specifically mentioned help me. So she is talking about the context of the way most families think of this. I'm trying to get in, so I want to know the things that help and the things that don't help, right? The college answer is always be authentic, be your authentic self. That's what we want to see. Right. I was trying to bring out the point that it really could work. The socioeconomics for a low income family could help you in some cases, but it could hurt you in other cases, or it could be a non-factor in other cases, depending on how much of a priority the school is either putting on tuition paying people, or depending on how much the school is really truly reading in context. Like even something like test scores. I've had people tell me they don't take family socioeconomics into consideration at all when they look at test scores. And you and I know there's a massive correlation with test scores and family socioeconomics. And so some of that is a little bit outside of your control, other than to do some research,
Right.
and try to apply, try to be your true self. I almost sometimes feel like the answer to this is the answer I often give when somebody wonders if they should maybe disclose a learning difference or something. And I often say to people, if the school doesn't want you for who you are, do you really want to be at that institution? Is oftentimes my answer. Like, you shouldn't feel like you have to hide an important component of who you are to get in. Like if a school is meant for you, you should be able to be who you are. And that's kind of how I feel on this. Like, don't force it. Don't try to, you're right. It could come off woe is me if you think, oh, is this a strength that I need to try to accentuate? And it comes off like you're trying to milk something. So don't do that. Be your authentic self, but just understand that, case in point, Selingo talked about this in his first book, that Lafayette literally, and credit to Lafayette for being so transparent. They shared with him that they have a 2-tiered process. You went into, can you pay $35,000 or more, or can you not? And if you can't pay $35,000, there were kids that were in the top 1% and 2% that weren't making it through the process. So it's sort of that net tuition revenue model, right? Like they were coming in at needing $59 million of aid if they were truly meeting the needs of everybody for maybe like a $20 million budget. So then, and it was driving the admission officers crazy because they were falling in love with these kids only to get them completely shaped out when they came back and said, we can't give away so many large aid awards. So then they went to this system. Can you pay 35 or less? And so I'm only bringing this up because...
Or more.
More, correct. I'm only bringing it up because I think the honest answer is low socioeconomics can play very differently, whether it's a potentially a positive, whether it's never a non-factor because it's part of your context if you're reading holistically.
Yeah, but the big point here, Mark, is that this is not a discernment that the readers of the application make when they are doing their primary or even their secondary assessment at a need-blind college. It is not part of the process. And I don't want this mom to think that what her child says about how she spends her time and so on and so forth leads to a conclusion about their economic status that's going to, in fact, affect the application outcome. The financial shaping of the class is done later. So when the application is read initially, and even I would say first and second, so the people who are falling in love with a kid are assigning ratings, and making a recommended admissions decision. They are not looking at financial status of the family and factoring that in. Even at a need-aware school, that's not done until after there's kind of quality control for the whole applicant pool.
Yeah.
So what the child has to say is how the student is choosing to share the story of their academic and personal wherewithal, right? And that's what they need to focus on. They're not going to gain or lose points. They will potentially earn points. Most colleges are on a point system for personal qualities that particular college values. And this is why I'm always saying, kids, read the mission statement of the college before you even start to write any part of your application, because you're going to see the college giving all sorts of information and giveaway there about the kind of attributes that they value the most. So if this is their mission, they're going to be looking for kids who are going to thrive in that environment, but also contribute to that. So that's where kids can advantage themselves, is by showing alignment with the institution in some tangible way. And, back to our mantra, fit and match.
Sure.
But nobody's giving a financial plus or minus when the student's application is being read.
If you don't get in because you get shaped out in the shaping process because of the finances, you don't get in. And
right.
So
that's a need aware situation.
Yeah. So, we talked a lot at first about schools looking for more Pell and more first gen. And I don't want to give the impression that it's a super big advantage everywhere to be financially needy. I think in terms of the ultimate income of whether you'll get into an institution, I think it can cut both ways depending on the institution. And I was just trying to bring that up because one of the least talked about institutional priorities, and I always give this an example when I'm meeting with my students and explaining them, is if a school feels like we need to get our net tuition revenue up, we need to bring in more full pace and high pace. They will never tell you that in an information session.
That's right.
How gauche would that sound? One of our priorities this year was we need more people that can pay. Well, I'm going to get up right now and walk out of here. So that's something that the money part is frequently talked about behind closed doors. And so I just didn't want to present the low income as a super big advantage everywhere. Like there's two sides to that coin. Friends, as I was editing this episode, I realized I said something that could be pretty confusing. So our listener from the Northeast specifically talked about need blind, how low income status impacts need blind. Now, let me go over something that could be confusing. Technically, if a school reads need blind, which most schools do, meaning they're not looking at your wallet when they make initial admissions decisions. That's the simplest way to put it. I took that from Peter Van Buskirk. We all borrow from people around here when we hear things that we like. If they're not looking at your wallet when they make admissions decisions initially, but then in the shaping process, if they come back and say, oh, we're over budget, that's a need-aware school. Being need blind is saying that we're not looking at your finances not only when we read, but even in the shaping process. We have the resources that we don't have to look at money. But then you wonder, well, why did I approach it the way that I did, saying, well, in the shaping process, money can still come into play. And the reason why I did that is because I don't believe schools when they say that they're need blind. I don't believe it. And when I talk to senior level people all across the country, this is a question I'll often ask. How many colleges do you truly, truly believe are need blind? And I will hear answers that range from 0 to 5. 0 to 5. Now, the people that say 0, that would be like Peter Van Buskirk. He feels very strongly about it. What he's basically saying is there's no school in the world that can afford to not take finances into consideration because at a minimum, you're recruiting and going to places where there's pockets of wealth in order to find people that can pay. So you're still truly not need blind. And it's like on the single biggest items in your budget. Who can ignore an item that large in your budget? And Peter has actually convinced me of that. But there are others that have enough money that they still may travel to wealthy places, much more so than they travel to, modest income places or under-resourced places. But they don't have to take money into consideration in the shaping process. So that is just so ingrained in my mind that even at schools that claim to be need blind, finances still play a role in the shaping process at some level. Once again, not at the reader level. Admission officers, they never even know this is even happening, but at the shaping level. So that's kind of why I went there. Hopefully that clarifies things rather than make them confusing, but I thought I'd share that.
And the whole extracurricular thing is not, you don't get more points for doing more, right? Colleges, if you're not recruited for something, that's an elite population that's dealt with separately. But if you're just a kid going through high school and you're involved in stuff, it's not like you get extra points in the evaluation for doing more.
Well, that's one of the biggest myths out there.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, it's how you've used your time
yeah.
to accomplish some things pursue your interests and have a positive impact.
Yeah. And
So
that
that's-
impact, depth is like people make the mistake of breadth over depth oftentimes. And just like, yeah, they're going to look at it through the prism of how are you going to come in here
Right.
and positively influence us? And that, how many times have we had someone say something to us like, I really don't want to play JV soccer. I don't like it, but I'm so scared if I quit. You know what I mean? It looks bad. And like any college would be like, why are you doing it if you don't enjoy it? Like,
and
we're not making a decision off of that,
We could care less whether you continue.
Exactly.
It's how you then choose to spend your time.
Correct.
And what you want to do. But that's just such a huge thing. There is, Mark, and I know we've said this before, that when I read an application and I can tell that this is a student who is from a very well-resourced background, because there are ways you can suss that out in an application. You expect more.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest about that, to whom much is given, much is expected. And now as a independent educational consultant, when I'm working with students who are kind of laying back in their privilege, I get very, very hard on them. If I get them early enough.
What do you mean by laying back in your privilege? I wasn't sure what you meant by that.
Well, whereas I get to know them and how they spend their time and think about how they're going to come across in their application. I'll say, I'm surprised that there isn't a service requirement. Did anybody at school ever say, you need to do something for other people? Let's talk about that, whether it was required or not. Where are you giving back? How is that going to come across in your application? What I often will do with those kids is we'll get out the bunch of the mission statements of the schools they're applying to, many of which refer to, service in some way or another. Some are more explicit than others. But, to talk about how do colleges measure character, personal qualities, non-cognitive attributes, whatever they call it, and why do they care about those things and the role that you as a potential student is going to play in their student body? Are you going to is it all about you and you advancing your finance career, which is, finance, tech, and consulting? There you are.
Yeah. Evan would be happy with you.
And how kids are going to be, come across, because they don't think about that. They really don't. They really don't think about that unless they go to a school like the one that we were at for many years, Mark, where there are, religious underpinnings or a call to social justice and accountability.
Susan, I really think your point about mission statement is very important. I would also add core values if they're listed on this school. You look at Pitzer's website, they could not be clear about what their core values are, and they truly mean them. They believe that. This is one example of many we could use.
Absolutely. Well, and, the usually on the same section of the website, you have the history of the college,
about
the mission and values, and the strategic plan. So right there, you have the past, the present, and the future.
You nailed it. I was going to get to those two, history and strategic plan. Like all of those things, like you said, mission, strategic plan, history, core values. Friends, looking at the mission statement, looking at the core values, looking at the history, looking at the strategic plan, they're all so important. But there's something else I want you to look at, and that is the school-specific questions, the custom prompts, the college-specific questions, when a college has them. It has been said that when you look into someone's eyes, the eyes are a window to the soul. Well, these college-specific questions are a lens right into the soul of the college. They let you know what matters to the college, and they let you know what the college is looking for. If I'm a low-income kid, I'm going to be looking for a ratification that's a population that's very important here to us.
I like that. Yep.
And because I feel like that's almost the best advice we could give Northeast Mom, because she's trying to figure this out, and you don't force it to talk about it. That's not going to come off natural. But probably the best thing you could do is to pick colleges that value that, and then just be true to yourself and answer the prompts honestly. Schools will know some things about you through different ways, like some of the things we've discussed. And trust the process and all the stuff we always say. Have a balanced list. And that's probably the best advice I think we could give.
I totally agree.
This was a fun discussion, Susan.
Absolutely. Thank you, Northeast Mom.
Thank you, Northeast Mom. And thanks to the generosity of the Princeton Review for sending in that SpeakPipe question, you are going to get your choice of one of the following 4 books: College Admissions 101, Essays That Kicked Apps, The Best 390 Colleges, Princeton Review Digital SAT Prep. Now, in order to get your book, you just need to send me an email at mark@schoolmatch4u.com, put Princeton Book Giveaway in the subject line, and in the body of the email, put the title of the book you want and put the episode number where we discussed your question, and just share a brief description of the question that you asked. All right, friends, let's transition to the final part of the conversation on deferrals. I'll be covering different policies for about 7 schools and letting you see how they're all over the place when it comes to the details, and the details matter. Listen and enjoy.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
Friends, it's time for part 3 of this deferral topic. I'm flying solo this time. But the most important thing that Jill and I discussed in those first 2 sections is reading the website. So I mentioned that I was going to share some actual policies that different schools have. And what I really want you to see is these policies are all over the place in terms of what they want you to do. And I hope you're okay with me reading a little bit, because I'm going to read right from the website so you can see what the policies are. Now, if I was to group the policies, I would put them in 3 buckets. So 1 is what I would call the no updates allowed policy. And I mean, when I say no updates allowed, they still are going to want the mid-year report, typically from the counselor. Okay. And you're still going to have to reaffirm whether or not you even want to still be considered. But no updates, no LOCI, no additional recs, no showing up on campus, no additional essays, no graded paper. Schools are all over the place on whether they allow updated test scores. You got to read the fine print. That's one thing I want you to remember. You got to read the fine print. The second category I'd put things in would be the very specific form. You know, this is sometimes seen as like the structured feedback form. So with here, oftentimes they have their own name for it, by the way, and you'll see some of those names in a second, because I'm going to share 7 or 8 different schools' policies with you. There's often a very strict character count or strict word count that's usually pretty short. No LOCI. And then the third one is really kind of the one that Jill and I really mostly focused on in our conversation, because it's very common, especially for private schools, especially for selective schools. But there are lots of models out there, and that's why I wanted you to do this kind of deeper dive into it today with you. So some people might call this the active engagement approach. Here, showing interest, very important. Schools are really using this, not just to see if you want to still be considered, but are we still the first choice? And this is particularly true for early decision, because some of the examples I'm going to share with you today are early decision, some are early action. And here, once again, read the fine print, because there's going to vary. Most of the time, there is going to be an LOCI, and typically, those are going to be 300 to 500 words. You do not want a 2 to 3 page LOCI. You have to remember how many other applicants are being read. Sometimes people call this the fighting for your spot approach. In other words, show the school how badly you want them, but don't just be fawning in a disingenuous way. Flattery will not serve you well at all. But here's a chance to do updates that, that you have going on in your life. This is quite common with small and mid-sized schools. Sometimes an additional rec is allowed. Sometimes a graded paper is allowed. Most of the time, updated test scores can be submitted. And of course, this would be in addition to, what I've already mentioned before, the mid-year report. So, all right. Here are the examples I'm going to read to you today, and I want you to see what's actually said on the website. I'm going to cover Michigan, Pomona, UVA, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, MIT, and Bowdoin. So 7 schools. It's a good mixture between small liberal arts, flagship schools, public, private, and we've got different parts of the country. You've got Atlanta with Georgia Tech, you've got Virginia with UVA, of course, Michigan, you got the Midwest, you got a New England small school in Bowdoin, and you've got another Midwest school in Notre Dame, South Bend, Indiana, and then, of course, MIT in Boston, Cambridge. So kind of picked it that way. Now, I have a bone to pick. I feel like doing a grinding my gears. For those of you who don't know what that is, I used to every now and then just spout off with something that grinds my gears in the way admissions works. And what is it? What grinds my gears is how many schools don't have their deferral policy on their website. Preparing for this took way longer than I thought because I was scouring around too many websites and I couldn't find it. But shout out to these schools, Michigan, Pomona, UVA, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, MIT, and Bowdoin, as examples of ones that have really good ones, especially the first 6, Michigan, Pomona, UVA, Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, and MIT. So I'm going to read their policies, and I want you to listen very carefully. I want you to you're going to see differences when it comes to things like the timeline. When do they want this? You're going to see differences when it comes to how clear they are on what to do and what not to do and what else you can do. Let me just read it and it'll be clear. All right, let's start with Michigan. First of all, Michigan's an example of one that has their own name. They call it the ECI. And ECI stands for Expression of Continued Interest. So let me read this. Submit your Expression of Continued Interest, ECI, no later than March 1st. Type any updates or additional information that you wish to add to your application in a free form format by logging into the Enrollment Connect and selecting Verify Continued Interest under the Action Items menu. The Expression of Continued Interest form is not required for consideration in our process, and they have not in bold. Furthermore, no preference is given for the order or the date in which the form is received. In other words, getting it in, January 1st doesn't give you an advantage of getting it in, later. Additionally, please note that we will only allow for a single submission of the Expression of Continued Interest form, and you will not have access to edit the form after it has been submitted. I'm just so grateful for schools that are crystal clear and elucidating their policy, or even that have them, that they share publicly. All right. Goes on to say a few more things. Contact your high school to have them send the mid-year report showing any recent grades that are available before mid-February. Submit both the Expression of Continued Interest form and recent high school grade updates. So notice they have a March 1 deadline on the Expression of Continued Interest form, but a February 15th deadline on the mid-year report. If you would like to submit additional information, our preference is to receive only the ECI form, grade updates, or any specifically requested information. Now, that's a very kind way of saying, don't send us more. So listen to what they say. If you would like to submit additional information, our preference is to receive only ECI form, grade updates, specific requested information. You need to read that as don't go above and beyond this. In fact, this is a statement right from the website. Anything outside of this will not impact your final decision. But I can tell you, it's an annoyance to admission officers when people don't follow instructions. I'm reminded of a conversation I had with UCLA's acting admission director. And one thing that grinds her gears is when people try to sneak their test scores into the UCLA process. UCLA's test free. It doesn't want test scores. and we were having a conversation, and she said, if people try to sneak their scores in, and you might be thinking, what do you mean sneak your scores in? She was telling me how often it happens. Well, you have to write your perseverance, PIQ on how you started out getting 1010 on your SAT, and now you're up to 1500, like that kind of stuff, right? Finding a way to sneak it in. She said, we can only come to two conclusions. Either you think the rules don't apply to you, or you don't follow instructions very well, and neither one makes a good impression. So I would encourage you to follow instructions. And even when they say anything outside this will not impact your final decision, when they've told you not to do it, don't do it. It's not going to help. All right, next. Why is the university providing the ECI form? This is all from their website. Historically, many applicants have attempted to provide further information about themselves after their application was submitted, but we did not offer standard guidance on how to do so. The quantity and quality of the information varied greatly, and follow-up with applicants was inefficient and cumbersome. The ECI allows for an equitable experience for all applicants who desire to send additional information after their application is completed, and provides guidance for the submission of that information. I commend Michigan for doing this because, I'm on the counseling side, and as soon as somebody gets deferred, knee-jerk react immediately. What do I do? What do I need to do to make it happen? And these are high achievers. They're used to having success, and they want to make something happen. And so most of the time, they're going to want to go above and beyond what this says. And I think it's wise to just be very clear what you want and what you don't want. I wish more schools would do it. All right, so that's Michigan. Let's look at Pomona. Now, Pomona does something that I really like, and I wish more schools would do. They come right out and tell you right away how many they defer. Says we typically defer 10 to 15% of our early applicants' candidacies. If you were deferred, it means the admissions committee found strong potential in your early application and would like to consider your application again among those in the regular decision round. We will notify you of our final decision by April 1st. Deferred students are either admitted or denied. By the way, I just have to stop. So far, they've done about 4 things that I love. They even have something on their website at all about deferrals, because so many don't. They let you know the percentage of people that were deferred, which I love. They're also doing something that I wish places like Harvard and MIT would do, which is they're only deferring people that they're really serious about. To defer 60 and 70%, I mean, come on. Who's kidding who? Like, what are your chances, So they're only deferring serious candidates, which is also awesome. And then they go on to have some more good quality gems and jewels in here. Deferred students are either admitted or denied. So here's what I love about that. One thing that we hate in college counseling, and the applicant hates it even more, is schools that they defer you and then they waitlist you. Defer you, pushing you to the regular round, compare you to those in the regular round, then they reach in the regular round and list you. Like that is just really bad. I had this analogy, and I know this is a little extreme, but I'm going to share it anyway. So you're supposed to get married, and you have all the plans and the preparation, and you got the date, and all the invites go out, and then at the last second, your fiance calls it off. Now, you can imagine all, commotion that creates, right? So, yeah, I just don't know if we're ready. I just think we need to take a little bit more time. So you go through counseling and spend some more time working in a relationship. And then a year later, you're ready to do it all over again. And then the same thing happens again, calls it off. Like, that's pretty calamitous. Some embellishment there on my part, but emotionally, that's what it feels like, getting deferred and then getting waitlisted in the regular round. So it's just nice for a school, one, to have that policy and then to be explicit about it. Come out and tell you that you're going to get an up or down decision if we defer you. There will not be any waitlist, because that's really common, actually, to go from deferral to waitlist. I mean, when I say it's really common, I'm not saying it happens most of the time. I'm saying it's really common for a school not to have a policy that we will absolutely not do that. All right. Then it goes on to say, meanwhile, you should send us your most recent grades, and you are invited to update us by March 1st with any new activities and endeavors. So Pomona's letting you know March 1st is when we need everything by. All right. So, but these are on the later end. Not everybody's March 1st. These first two are March 1st. Not everybody is March 1st. I know last week we talked about earlier mid-February, but you'll see some schools are even January, okay? It's just every school is different. It says, feel free to contact us at admissions@pomona.edu or use this self-service tool in your applicant portal. In fact, I can think of 3 schools that like for the information to be there when they get back by break, after the winter break. So you just got to really look at the fine print. All right, next up, the University of Virginia, UVA. Now, UVA just has an awesome website. Like, I'm sorry, but I just have to give it to Greg Roberts and Dean J over there. Like, they really do a great job, and their team. They're so honest and transparent and have so much data. There's just so many sections of that website I like. And when it comes to having a deferral section, they not only have a deferral section, they have 10 explicit FAQs about deferred. So first one, what do I do now? And I'm not going to read all 10 to you, but I'm going to read about 5 or 6 of them. What do I do now? That's what everybody wants to know. So here's what UVA says. You have many things on your plate as a senior, so we keep the to-do list short. Number 1, fill out the deferral form in the My UVA applicant portal to be considered again in the regular decision process. And now look at what their deadlines are. I mentioned there's different deadlines. Early decision students must do this by January 15th. Okay, see, we've got March 1, January 15th. Early action students must do this by February 15th. Of course, we have to have it confusing, right? Different deadlines for early action versus early decision. So you got 2 deadlines to work with there, January 15th or February 15th, whether you're ED or EA. Next, get mid-year grades to us by February 15th. You may upload a screen grab of your mid-year grades in the portal, or your school counselor may submit them. Look how clear this is. These are the only action items you have. Keep up the great work at school and beyond. Now look how explicit this is. Third question. Will an LOCI, and they spell it out there because not everybody might not know what LOCI is. Will a letter of continued interest or recommendations help my chances? Why can't every college have this section? Answer. The deferral form in your portal takes the place of a letter of continued interest or LOCI. This time they do say it that way. Declaring a commitment to attend will not influence our review. So writing an extra letter will not impact our review. So this is that minimalist position I talked about earlier when I kind of laid out there's sort of 3 main views on deferrals if I had to categorize them. If we already have the required teacher recommendation, you've met our needs. We do not need additional recommendations. Could that be any clearer? And by the way, we do not need additional recommendations means do not send additional recommendations. Okay, next question. This is all off their 10 FAQs just on deferral. May I speak with someone regarding my application decision? We're happy to answer general questions not covered on this page, which is already more robust than pretty much anybody. But we cannot speak with callers about applications that are still under review. Next question. What if I took an SAT or ACT after the application deadline? We will accept new standardized test results if you applied with testing. There is a section in your student portal to submit new scores. Our system will superscore automatically if you add new scores to your file. All right, last of the FAQ questions on deferral I'm going to read. I didn't read all of them. Don't want you guys here till midnight, but I read 5 or 6. All right, last one. May I amend or update my application? You can't edit your Common App, but you can submit updates through your My UVA applicant portal, which accepts most file types except for sound and video files. Items uploaded through the portal are filed instantly. The portal will give an error message if there was a problem with the upload. Please note that the portal can't read the document submitted, so it will not appear on the checklist. Please do not email updates to admission officers. So that's a question people have, like, who am I communicating with? So, awesome. UVA, A+. Next, another A+, Georgia Tech. All right, Georgia Tech's an early action school. They have a big section. It's called Next Steps for Deferred Students. Here we go. Now, they're another one of these, like Michigan, they have their own name. I know it's complicated. Complete the DSF. What's a DSF? It's the Deferred Supplemental Form, which is available in your admissions portal. I hope you're hearing this admissions portal theme a lot, because you are. This is where the communication happens after you hit submit. And submit your mid-year transcript or self-report your mid-year grades by the dates outlined. Now, of course, we have to be complicated here because they don't have ED and EA, but they do have 2 rounds of EA. They have Early Action 1 and Early Action 2. Now, for Georgia, Early Action 1 in-state, Early Action 2 out-of-state. So, if you're an Early Action 1 applicant, January 14th, 2026. Mid-January is your date. If you're Early Action 2, your deadline's February 16th, 2026. So there you go. So now you've already heard you've heard deadlines go from mid-January, February, up to March 1st. And we've only looked at maybe 3 schools. If transcript is not available by the deadline, please submit it as soon as possible. If you would like to submit new or updated test scores, the final date for new test scores to be considered is February 2nd, 2026. See how explicit this is? I don't understand why more schools can't understand. These are questions that people have. And like, if they don't want to have their phone blown up, or if they don't want to receive extraneous information that they're not going to use in their process, put the time into having a really good FAQ section on your website. Now, here's an interesting part. This is on here. Non-native English-speaking applicants are encouraged to participate in a recorded interview that will be added to your application for admission. While this video is not required, and there is a cost associated with it, it offers you a chance to express yourself in a manner that cannot be presented in the written application. We ask that you complete and submit your interview by February 16, 2026. This is a shout out to Gloria and Terry Crawford, who started doing these interviews really at Georgia Tech for Georgia Tech. So shout out to them and their great work. And then it says, if you no longer want to be considered for the first year admission, visit your admission portal to cancel your application to Georgia Tech. All right. Next up, Notre Dame. Notre Dame also gets A+ for their handling of this. But one thing you need to understand, most schools don't have sections like this. Like, I had to really scour to find, some for you guys. And I particularly wanted to have a range of schools, public, private, Midwest, South, Northeast, West, small, large, flagship, non-flagship. Notre Dame. A deferred decision means that the admissions committee is excited about your application. It would like to evaluate it in the context of the larger regular decision pool. A deferral gives you another opportunity to strengthen your application. See, that is not what a lot of people would say. While we know that a deferral is probably not the news you were hoping for, it is important to keep in mind that a deferral is not the end of the admission process. We only defer a student if we feel they may be competitive later in the process, which is, I wish, the way everybody would do it. Not everybody does do it that way. All right, here are our 6 tips for deferred applicants. Number 1, and this is something that Julie and I talked about last week, do not rush to reply. I wish more schools would do this, because when I work with students, the reflexive reaction is just, is, okay, where do I sign up? And so not always thoughtful. And that's kind of what they're addressing here. But once again, this is Notre Dame. So this is what Notre Dame says. Step back breathe, spend time with loved ones, enjoy the holiday season. Do not rush to immediately submit updates after receiving your decision. A deferral means that you already put in a strong application. Take a moment to truly reflect on why you want to attend Notre Dame. Give yourself the space to authentically discern what calls you to join the Notre Dame community before you send any updates or new materials. Okay, we talked about that the last couple of weeks, last week in particular. But this is Notre Dame's policy. Number 2, upload an intentional and authentic letter of continued interest to your applicant status portal. So it's very clear words: intentional, authentic, and to the portal. And then, this is something we talked about a lot, June, particularly in the first segment, about reaffirming if a school is your first choice. How a lot of times when schools go to deferred applicants, they don't want to go and whiff. They like to go and pick someone that's going to come. So this is what it says. If Notre Dame is truly your first choice, write a letter of desire explaining why you believe Notre Dame is the best school for you. This letter is a great opportunity to tell the admissions committee more about yourself and to explain why you would love to attend Notre Dame. You may remember we talked about that. Like, make that crystal clear if they're your first choice. Also, be sure to include what you hope to bring to the Notre Dame community. You have to think like the way a school thinks. And the school is thinking, how's the student going to help us? How's the student going to make us better? So you have to think that way in your writing. We want to know why it's a community that you want to be a part of and how you will contribute to it during your 4 years here. When your letter is ready, upload it directly into your application via the portal. No need to email. The system highlights new materials for the admissions committee when they are submitted. Did you catch that? The system highlights new materials for the admissions committee when they're submitted. Next, send your first semester grades. The next most important update, send the first semester grades from your senior year. Many high school counselors will do this automatically, but check with your counselor to confirm your grades are sent. We want to see that you are maintaining your strong academic performance throughout senior year, especially if you're taking high-level, rigorous classes. These are also required for all regular decision applicants. So if anybody ever said to you the senior year doesn't matter, you should know that for many schools, it absolutely does. Why does everybody want to see mid-year grade reports, senior grades? You notice you're hearing this theme over and over again. All right, more advice. Include any notable new extracurricular accomplishments or awards. This is another reason why Julie and I don't like people to do it right away. How can you possibly have anything to share if you just do it right away? And we talked about that. So here's what it says about this. Through your applicant status portal, you should update us on any significant extracurricular accomplishments or awards that you received after you submitted your restrictive early action application. This may include things like a new leadership role, recognition after a sports season ends, or a service impact award. We want to see how you have continued to be a pillar of the community of which you are part of. Be sure to upload additional materials via your applicant status portal. This will ensure that updates appear immediately in your application. They are flagged as new materials for us on our end. Updates are compiled into one document for review. Next, I'll tell you, Notre Dame may be up there. Boy, they're right up there with UVA, Georgia Tech, Michigan, MIT, which I haven't read yet, but as the best ones. Here's number 5, and this is just so clear. Captions, different color font, everything. Now this is in bold, upper caps, by the way. Do not. I'm shouting because that's how it is on the screen, right? Big, bold, upper caps. Case font. Do not send additional letters of recommendation. We do not encourage additional letters of recommendation beyond those submitted with your original application. We will review additional letters submitted on your behalf, but this usually is not the best way to strengthen your application. Now, this is one thing I wish they didn't do. Don't say do not in big caps, do it, and then say we will review them. Sorry, mixed messages. Some of the other schools were clearer and just saying we're not going to review them. But anyway, it says the most important voice we hope to hear from in your deferral update is your own. 6 point, be patient. We know that this can be a stressful applicant process, that waiting often can be the hardest part. You've been eagerly waiting for your college decisions. And if you were deferred, you don't have the clarity of your finality you were probably hoping for now. You will hear from us in mid to late March when we release our regular decision notifications. Our best advice is to relax, focus on things that bring you joy. You will only get to experience this period truly once in your life, so enjoy your senior year as much as possible. Trust that you are on the right path for you and that you have put your best foot forward. Now, I know you might be thinking, Stuck, you said all that was clear, but you didn't tell me when they want it. Of course, they have their act together. They're not going to miss out on that. Big, bold font. Last thing, submitting updates. We will review all documents uploaded directly to your applicant status portal. Please submit any deferral updates for our consideration by February 1, 2026. So that's when they want it, February 1st. All right. MIT and then Bowdoin. And hopefully you guys, by then, just get a sampling of the different things that are out there. Now, here's another one that has their own name, of course. MIT, their famous fun form, fun, F-U-N. I don't know if people think it's fun, then they got deferred. Fun in MIT's language is an acronym that stands for February Updates and Notes. February Updates and Notes. They call it the fun form, and they've had it forever. All right. Can I send in new materials? Can I redo parts of my application? Can I send in new letters of recommendation? Can I send a new portfolio? This is all a question in their FAQ section under deferrals, which shout them out for doing this. And then it says, we deferred you because we want to reevaluate your application as is. And then it says, example, it is competitive as it is. Now, this is also in bold. You cannot rewrite your essays. You cannot redo your interview. You cannot replace your letters of recommendations with new ones. And you cannot redo your application. The only update you need to send is the February update and notes, their fun form. We will send you an email letting you know when the form is available. In the fun form, you tell us things like your mid-year grades, anything new that has happened or will happen before we review RA applications, like new awards, activities, work, etc. Anything about your circumstances that have changed since you submitted your application that you think we need to know. Note, you do not need to fill out the form with new updates. And I'm glad they said that, because sometimes people really stress out, especially accomplishments, like, well, I haven't accomplished anything. Oh my goodness, I'm toast. So I'm glad they said that. If you're only providing your mid-year grades, that's totally fine. If you have new test scores, log into your application status page, scroll down to where you can see all the scores you've submitted. Below the test scores chart is a link that says add any new test scores. Clicking this link will bring you to a new page where you can self-report your scores. You do not need to send in official scores from the testing agency. By the way, that is in bold. I mean, it's highlighted in bold, like when you in bold, not uppercase, but it's in bold. Please note, scores cannot be deleted once they're submitted. And when is the MIT fund form due? February 15th. All right, last one, really short and sweet on Bowdoin. It doesn't have the details the other one does, but at least they have something. All right, Bowdoin. If the decision on an application has been deferred, that application will be reviewed during the regular decision round. In the meantime, feel free to submit an update in the new year on any activities or other relevant material you feel might be helpful. You can submit an update on your application portal, or you can email it to admissions@bowdoin.edu. This should be received by February 15th. All decisions will be sent March 1. Okay. Not March 1. All decisions will be sent in March. So there you have it. Hopefully everybody saw. Policies are all over the place. Different schools have their own names. I gave you 3 that have their own names. And they have different deadlines. and they have different things they want you to do. So if you don't see anything at all on the school's website, inquire directly from the school. And hopefully in future, they'll decide to put a section on their website. They get asked a question enough times. Anyway, hopefully you guys found this to be helpful. Let's transition to a brand new interview I did with Susan Brisson. And she's the director of admission at Olin College of Engineering.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, some of you may not have heard of Olin, the Olin College of Engineering. And I can assure you, if you haven't heard of it, it's not because it's not a stupendous, stellar institution that is one of the most reputable engineering schools in the world. It has more to do with the fact that it's not even 30 yet, 30 years old. It'll be 30 at the end of this year. And the fact that it's really, really small. But it's an outstanding institution. And I hope you enjoy my interview with the director of admission, Susan Brisson. It's a three-parter. And in part one, Susan gives her backstory. Susan gives us the basics about Olin. Just the general stuff, size, location, things that, you'd want to know. Quick overview. Then Susan explains why you will see the name Olin on so many different colleges and universities across the country. Susan explains what makes Olin different from other engineering-oriented colleges. Susan explains the first-year curriculum at Olin and how unique it is. Susan talks about the size of Olin and what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages when you have a school that's this small. And Susan talks about the BOW consortium and how it benefits students. Listen and enjoy. Friends, I'm here with Susan Brisson from Olin College of Engineering. Welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, Susan.
Thank you very much.
Well, our listeners are great, and one of our listeners connected us. And so thank you, all you listeners out there that connect me with senior level people in the world of admissions and college life, because Susan doesn't know this, but she was on my to want to interview list.
Oh, so exciting. That's great.
Yeah, friends. So we're gonna do a deep dive today on Olin. But before we do, Susan, share your backstory.
Sure thing. Glad to do that, Mark. I'm delighted to be here. So I have been at Olin since 2014. I am the director of admission here. And I've worked in education my entire professional life, worked at different institutions in admission. I did take a, kind of protracted hiatus mid-career to raise my family, raise my children. And during that time, I did a little bit of volunteer work on the counseling side, which, really kind of helped me look at this work in a more expansive way, I think. And certainly, and I know you're a proud parent as well, my experience shepherding my own kids through the process, I think has informed my work more than anything. Seeing it, I remember a long time ago when I first started working in college admissions, somebody said, well, it's not personal, the decisions. And that didn't sit right with me as a young person. And as I have gotten older, that completely doesn't sit right with me. Just because it's not personal for the institution, it's extremely personal to the families and the kids involved. And so I always try to remember that and kind of lead with that, because I think that's really important.
Yeah, my favorite story on that is, parents are always saying to me that I want to work with you because I just don't feel my kid is going to listen to me. They're just not. It's not going to be good for the last 18 months. And for my oldest daughter, Karis, she was like, she just listened to everything. And so,
great.
But then when my second one came around, Joy, boy, it was like World War III. She fought me over everything. And it was painful at the time.
Wow.
But I'm so glad that I had that experience so that I can relate when parents, when parents start sharing. So yeah, we definitely draw off all of our experience with our kids every day.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about Olin, like just initially, like location, size, just for someone who may not be familiar with it, just the basics?
Absolutely. Yep, sure. So Olin College of Engineering, we're in Needham, Massachusetts, which is about 12 miles west of the city of Boston. So it's a suburban location, but we have good access to Boston, which I think, provides a wealth of opportunities for students, whether it's social or academic adjacent internships, all of that. We are all engineering, meaning we only offer degrees in engineering, and we're all undergraduate as well. So we have just under 400 undergraduate students at Olin, and we were founded, in 1997. So we're pretty young by college standards, and we were founded very specifically to teach engineering in a different way. We were a startup, and even though now we are past our 2-decade mark, we're still growing and evolving in the way you would expect a startup to be doing. We have some partnerships with some area colleges, Babson and Wellesley in particular, that allow us to expand our academic and social offerings for students, which I think is very appealing. And we have a really wonderful, dedicated faculty and a unique project-based curriculum. So I always say it's not for every kid who wants to do engineering, but it is a very special experience for the person who wants that.
So, Susan, you'll see the name Olin on a lot of campuses. It's a very common name. Is there any connection at all to?
Absolutely.
Talk about that.
Absolutely. So the Franklin W. Olin Foundation existed for years and supported financially a variety of college campuses around the country, and specifically funded the construction of different buildings on campus. Our partner over at Babson College next door, there's an Olin building in their graduate program. I think Cornell has an Olin library. Wash U has I know there's probably 40 or so buildings across the country that are Olin named buildings. And so our origin story, if you will, is that the F.W. Olin Foundation decided that in order to have greater impact in higher ed, it wasn't enough to simply build buildings on different campuses, but really what the foundation decided to do was to take that money and make that the endowment for a brand new college, which was Olin College of Engineering. So the foundation was dissolved and in fact became Olin College. And that was, I said, in 1997. And it was in direct response to a report that was done by the National Academy of Sciences criticizing the way that engineering was being taught in our country. And so we were founded in direct response to that.
So that's a lead into what makes Olin different. I'm sure if it was birthed out of we need to do it a different way, that's got to be something you're prioritizing, right? So what makes Olin different, and what's humanistic engineering? Sure.
I'm glad you asked about that. So what makes Olin different? A couple things. We're small. I think that seems like a minor point, but actually it's really significant because it does enable us to be responsive and agile in the development of our curriculum, in embarking on new partnerships. Our original charge was kind of to help educate engineers in a way that was more broad thinking. Previously, if anybody who was trained as an engineer in the 1980s, 70s, and 80s, like my husband was, it was a very kind of content-heavy, theoretical approach. And students wouldn't really work on engineering projects until they were pretty advanced in the curriculum. So that was a big change right away. Olin students work in a project-based curriculum, which means they do projects straight away, and they're learning content alongside that. So there's no sort of separate experience where you're learning math and science concepts and kind of holding on to them in the hopes that you will apply them later, but rather you're learning things and using them in real time. So that's one significant difference. We were committed to what we used to call in the day sort of a gender balanced student body. So we have a very strong female representation in the student population, which is something we've been committed to for years. And then our goal now, and this has always been implicit, but has become more explicit in the past 5 years, is that we really want to expand not only engineering education, so it is more accessible to all different kinds of people, but also to educate our students to have a sense of understanding of the world. So in fact, if they're going to be engineers and they're going to be solving problems in the world, they need to understand the world. They need to study arts and humanities and social sciences and ethics and all of those things. And they need to study them in context. Again, it can't be a siloed, oh, I'm going to take, modern novels over here, and it's never going to interact with any of the STEM work I do. But rather, it is an interdisciplinary curriculum where we look at lots of different topics through a variety of lenses. We have a faculty that's very broad in their background and expertise, and that kind of brings that all to bear in the classroom situation in real life. So that's the broad view, I think, of what makes us different. It's the project-based work, but it's that sort of humanistic view of things. And that concept of a humanist engineer is something that has been implied in the curriculum for a long time. It is becoming more and more explicit now as we look at real world problems that we are all facing, and educating students to be prepared and equipped to be responsible and ethical in the way they do their work.
No, that's great. So when I think of project-based engineering, I think of schools like Rose-Hulman in Indiana and Harvey Mudd out in Claremont colleges, right?
Absolutely.
WPI and Clarkson. Those are some that come to mind. How would you be similar or different than some of those schools?
Sure. Well, I'm not an expert on any of those schools, so I can't really speak to the differences. But what I can say is that our project work begins in the first semester of the first year. So students begin to work on those projects right away. And they are very often group projects. There's some independent project work, but it's primarily group project or collaborative project. And the business of learning how to work effectively on a team is part and parcel of the curriculum as well. And particularly in that first year, students come to us with a variety of different experiences in high school. Some people have worked on teams very effectively, whether they've been an athlete or a musician or a roboticist working on a robotics team. But not everybody has had those experiences. And so there is, kind of a push in the first year for students to learn how to do that effectively, because that kind of predicates everything really in the curriculum. And I think too that our students have the first year curriculum is the same for everybody, regardless of major, and nobody declares their major until sophomore year. So we really focus on breadth in the curriculum. And I think that's another thing that's different about us, is encouraging students to really explore sort of the breadth of what we offer, understanding all of the interactions and connections across disciplines. So it's not simply doing the project, but it's understanding a user, understanding the societal impacts of choices that you may make, and developing a sense of responsibility to the users as well. I think, and I'm sure these other schools consider all of those things as well, but I think we do it really well.
Tell us a little bit more about the first year curriculum, like what happens in that first year, Susan?
Sure. So students, as I said, come in and they all take the same thing in the first year. And so in the first semester, they're taking a class called Quantitative Engineering Analysis, which is for some students a 2-course sequence, and for others it's a 3-course sequence, depending on what their major is. And they're studying, math, linear algebra, particularly in physics, in that class. And so that is a required course. They're taking a course called Modeling and Simulation, ModSim, looking at doing computer modeling. There is a circuits class that they take. And then they also take a class called Design Nature in the first year. And that is an introduction to user-oriented design. And one thing that's different, I think, about the class is we really empower students to take ownership of the entire sort of design arc, beginning with, sort of identifying a problem with users. What are we looking to solve here? What are we seeking to accomplish? Kind of brainstorming, prototyping, taking the prototype to a user, giving it a shot, iterating through another better, more effective design. And so that is the introduced in the design nature class. Actually, it's kind of cool. They do a couple of really cool projects. It's a bio-inspired class. And so there are two somewhat, I would say, from Olin perspective, iconic assignments where students will design what they call a hopper. So they have to go into nature, go into the fields around campus and observe an insect that hops, and then they have to build something that mimics that motion. And so that's a first year, first semester thing that all the first years do together. And there's a big reveal. Everybody gets to demonstrate their hoppers, and it's really fun. And then the next project they do is like the game project or the play experience, where they work in teams this time to design a game or a toy or a play experience that a 10-year-old child would be interested in playing. And then again, sort of working together to collaborate, taking the inspiration from the natural systems, natural worlds, and creating something that's fun from that. And those, I think, kind of set the stage for understanding the entire scope of the design experience.
So let's talk about your size, because that's obviously unique and distinct. And I'm sure for some it's appealing and for others it's not.
For sure.
I know a lot of students will say to me, I can't go to a college smaller than my high school. Like, this is something that I'll hear for colleges that are like under 2,000.
Sure.
So how do you present the size, and how do you sort of discern who's going to be really a good fit for the size versus someone who this is not going to be what's going to, they're looking for in a college experience?
Sure, absolutely. Well, you're absolutely right. Whenever we survey, our admitted students, the students who choose Olin always say it's the size in the community, and then of course the students who don't choose Olin always say it's the size. So it's what you like, right?
Yes.
It's like anything. And so I think our goal is to be, of course, completely transparent about it. We are small. And, I think for us, the advantages are you are a known quantity. It's impossible to fall through the cracks at Olin. Everybody knows your name, for better or worse. There are probably some days when people hate that. And so that's one piece of it. There is an expectation that students, or I shouldn't say an expectation, it is in the student culture that students will be engaged in the community. So I do think for somebody who's not looking for, or I don't want to make this sound negative, but somebody who's looking for a less demanding experience in that way, maybe Olin wouldn't be the best choice. I think that, we do have the partnerships that I mentioned with Babson and Wellesley. It's called the BOW collaboration. So Babson, Olin, Wellesley, BOW. So that does give students a chance to cross-register for classes. And also there are some shared student activities. So opportunities for students to be part of different communities. And our location is helpful too. You can get into Boston on a Saturday and, get away from campus and do something different. But really the size creates a wonderful sense of connectedness for students. And my colleagues in student affairs do an amazing job onboarding new students into this culture and helping them, kind of take the best of it and manage the parts that are harder, which is that, some days you just don't want to be, visible. I guess maybe that's the right way to look at it. It does allow us to, students have a great relationship with the faculty. They're able to be in very small classes. They're able to really have impact in the community, whether they're in an activity or serving on a committee or anything like that. And Oliners have a very strong sense of identity, which persists after graduation as well. So there is in the alumni population, a very strong sense of themselves as Oliners, which is great for them, but it also helps the students who are preparing to graduate. The alumni community, while it is not as vast as other places, is very strong and very committed. So that's a real plus as well.
Susan, elaborate more on BOW,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there may be listeners that aren't familiar with Babson or Wellesley, and talk about those schools and talk about typically would a typical Olin student take, 1, 2, 3, or 4 courses over there, or talk about a little bit how students take advantage of both Babson and Wellesley.
Absolutely. So Babson is literally right next door. I mean, I'm in my office. I can look out the window. I can see the Babson campus from where I sit. And for folks who don't know, that is, the best business and entrepreneurship college in the country, no question. I think lots of students who are interested in engineering, or I should say students who are interested in Olin engineering and come here, are often makers and doers. And with that comes a very entrepreneurial mindset. There are classes about entrepreneurship in our curriculum, but Babson's offerings are just far more vast than what we can offer. So that's a very easy connection right there. We also share facilities with Babson. So we share the Babson athletic facility. We share the health center with Babson. The Babson police, the campus security, includes Olin in their purview as well. And then faith services, the chapel. So those are facilities, Babson facilities that Olin students share. And again, walkable, right next door, not a big deal. Wellesley is a couple miles away. It is a women's college, but male students may cross-register for classes at Wellesley. And, probably one of the best liberal arts colleges in the country, really strong and rich curricular offerings across the board. I mean, I think sometimes students think, I'll take my humanities class at Wellesley, or maybe I studied foreign language in high school and I really want to keep up with my German or Spanish. We don't offer those classes at Olin, so that would be an opportunity. Students could cross-register at Wellesley to do that. But also, we offer an opportunity for students to do a self-design concentration at Olin. And if they're choosing something like bioengineering, Wellesley has got the rich and deep curricular offerings in the sciences. So a student who is on that path might select classes from the Wellesley curriculum to augment their program at Olin. As far as the number of students who do this, I'd have to talk to the registrar. Anecdotally, the students that I know, students, who work for us and whatever, I would say most of the students I know have taken at least 1 or 2 classes at the partner institutions. And some have taken many more depending on what their interests are. It's not required. I should point that out. We have many students who find all the coursework that they need for their particular major right here on the Olin campus. So it's not a requirement, but it's a pretty easy thing to do. And we also, there's a shuttle service that goes over to Wellesley, so students can get there. They can use their dining hall swipes at Wellesley and Babson if they're there, through a mealtime, or they want to get a meal there, they can do that. And then there also are clubs and organizations. I mean, our students can play intramural sports at the partner institutions. There is like a rock climbing club that's a joint venture with Babson, Olin, and Wellesley, and a couple of other clubs as well. So again, opportunities for students to be part of another community, just to kind of give a broader experience, really.
Friends, this concludes this part of my interview with Susan Brisson, Director of Admission at Olin College of Engineering. Hope you join us next week for the next part. Friends, on Monday's episode, I'm continuing this series of kind of monologues I'm doing on the intro. And I'm going to return to a question I've answered years ago. It may be the most frequently asked question I get in the counseling room. And it is, how many colleges should I apply to? And I've got a view that's different than what you'll hear from most people. So you'll hear me articulate and I believe defend that view on Monday. And then we've got another brand new interview. It's with Peter Pitts, an admission vet of 49 years. He's retired now, but he's still a prolific author. He's written about a half dozen books. And we'll be focusing a lot on his book, Small College Magic. Subtitle, It's Life-Changing. It'll be a 3-parter with Peter, and you'll hear part 1 of 3. And friends, remember, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there. That is what is going to determine your level of career success. See you Monday, friends. And that's our show. Big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed, and you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid.website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify, and if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Escabel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stalionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.